Hello and welcome to Wild Talk. This is a new series where we're bringing together guests from across the industry to talk. Talk about all kinds of things. That's why we call it Wild Talk. Tonight we have Rod Giltaca from the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. We're going back in history with Brendan Murphy. Matt Besco is here to talk about chronic wasting disease. Kyle Stelter from the Wild Sheep Society is also here tonight, and we'll hit him up with some questions in our Ask the Expert segment. We have some outstanding videos of some too close encounters with some big animals. Now, I'll send you all over to Ryan and Joe.
How's it going, Joe?
Ryan is going well. I am pulled over in the sleepy town of Superior, Montana currently, parked next to a bank in the shade. So if you hear a knock at the window, it's probably the cops wondering why a strange guy's parked next to a bank. But fingers crossed they leave me alone for long enough to do this.
I'm not far off from you. I'm at the Twin Rinks at the River Cree in Edmonton. My sons are on the ice skating right now, so I had to get them to make sure they get to hockey. And I think that's kind of the point of the show is we can be anywhere. Joe and I are going to host the show, and we're going to host it from whether it's a moose camp, elk camp, or a deer camp, or anywhere we can get our phones working and have some time to talk to some great people. So we got 4 really cool guests. We're going to go to those guests now. I think Joe's chatting with Rod to start, and Rod's got some really great information to share with us, which is going to be fun. Let's chat.
Yes, sir. First up, we have Rod Giltaca joining us here, president of the CCFR. Rod, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're extremely busy. You've been extremely busy over the last few years with everything that's been going on for legal gun ownership here in Canada. I just want to first and foremost thank you for everything you've been doing for us as a personal gun owner, as well as a member of society. I just think what you're doing is invaluable. So thank you so much for doing that. Rod, would you like to say hello?
Hey, Joe.
Awesome. Well, Rod, I know you're quite busy, but I want to kind of introduce the CCFR to some individuals who are watching who may not know so much about the organization. A lot of people would consider it the gun lobby, if you will, but what are other kinds of things is the CCFR organization involved with across the board?
Well, first and foremost, I think, and certainly our roots are, we're a public relations organization because the people that started the CCFR, I was there very close to the beginning, but not at the beginning, recognized that there's the issue that gun owners and even hunters to some extent have is that the majority of Canadians, they don't own guns. The majority of Canadians don't hunt. They don't have any understanding of guns. They don't understand the culture. And the only exposure that they've had typically is messaging from governments, which can be problematic. And they see firearm-related violence on TV and maybe on social media and whatnot. And basically, we felt that if we were going to fight this political fight, because gun control and that kind of thing is really a political issue, and if we were going to fight that, we need to reach out to non-gun owning Canadians and show them what real gun owners and real hunters and people like ourselves, what we really look like. We're really your neighbors and the mechanic that works in your car and your doctor and, your buddy that comes over to shovel your driveway because you threw your backhoe. Those are gun owners in Canada. So we do a variety of things to reach out to the non-gun owning public, and then we take some direct action as well.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned the divide in knowledge in the general society, the general population of regarding gun ownership. And as somebody who grew up in a small town that was logging and hunting based, and that was a big part of society, we had a much different understanding and upbringing around firearms. And when I moved to Ontario for my 8-9 years during my professional football career, and just the divide in knowledge between those two areas was mind-boggling. And like you mentioned, they're so influenced by the news and society, and also a lot of news from the US that I think floods up, and there's a blurred line regarding the difference in regulations once you cross the border here in Canada and how strict we actually are already to begin with. So I think the work that you're doing in educating that group in the middle that may not have that knowledge is invaluable to us as gun owners and just general members of society. So thank you very much for that. I know we have relatively limited time here on the show, and you're quite busy as well. So we could talk about this for days and days and days. What, as a gun owner, what are some of the hottest topics right now, or some of the biggest issues facing us, in your opinion, some of the most pressing issues you think that we're facing currently right now?
Well, I think overall, the biggest issue we're facing, other than gun bans and whatnot, we can get into that. The biggest issue we're facing is that um, we're really, I guess if I don't want to put too sharp a point on it, we're really victims of a pretty significant propaganda campaign right now, right? We're being misrepresented by the current government pretty severely, and by the media when they can get away with it. And there's just, yeah, we're facing a lot of bad press, undeserved bad press. And again, that goes all the way into hunting. The comments that I see in social media and some of the things like that regarding hunting, I just see how it starts with like sort of how it works is it starts with people that own black guns or handguns. And then once they're gone, they move on to more traditional firearms. And then at the end of the day, it's the people that own bolt actions and lever actions and pump action shotguns. They're the next most dangerous group, right? When the measures of the government, I guess, puts out to increase public safety, when they don't work, then they just keep on going down the line. So really, it's a public relations war. The CCFR does a lot of work. We did recently put out 66 billboards across the country, and referred that to our one of our websites called gundebate.ca, where we put reports and animated explainer videos, and our television show that we did with Wild TV called Gun Ban Canada Exposed, a show about data and the other side of the conversation. Our effort is to try to reach out to Canadians and say, people that legally own firearms are not the people that you're seeing all the time. And if we can successfully have regular Canadian, urban Canadians understand who gun owners really are, we're just like everybody else, except we have a firearms license and we're highly vetted, then that political advantage that some political parties are trying to realize by kind of beating up on hunters and beating up on gun owners, that political advantage kind of disappears. And when that disappears, then they're not motivated to come after us anymore. So it's a difficult topic to talk about. It's a very difficult fight. It's very nuanced and very hyperbolic, to be honest, and it's quite stressful. But anyway, that's our challenge, and we're doing every activity we can possibly think of to help people understand who gun owners really are.
Well, it is a very nuanced and difficult challenge, but I just want to come out and say you guys have been doing a phenomenal job so far. I think you touched on a lot of very important topics, especially regarding why, I know a lot of people that own certain guns for hunting. They're like, well, I just own a pump action shotgun or a lever action or, just my regular bolt action rifle. Why they need to be concerned at this stage as well, and why it's not just, the sports shooting industry's fight, it's everybody's fight. And the fact is that there is a series of dominoes, and once one domino topples, the momentum doesn't stop. It picks up and it continues and it gains speed. And the fact that you're getting started early, we're going to prevent that momentum right at the start, because as it gains momentum, it's only going to get more difficult to stop it. So I think you've touched on some very, very important topics again. And you mentioned as well that here in Canada that there's already a very intense vetting process for gun owners. For some of our viewers, they may be aware of some of the vetting that goes on for the non-restricted firearms, but there's also some extremely regulatory processes involved for the restricted firearms as well. Would you like to touch on some of those processes and what the current gun owners in Canada are already vetted for?
So most people are probably aware that you need a license to possess any kind of firearm in Canada. And that's called the PAL, the non-restricted license, as we might call it as well. And there's two licenses that you can get as a normal kind of civilian, which are the non-restricted PAL and the restricted PAL. So non-restricted firearms being rifles and shotguns for a hunting and sporting purpose. We know about those. And then you can get restricted firearms, which used to be AR-15s, but now those are prohibited, too dangerous to own, and also handguns. And now we are facing a handgun ban as well. Time is running out. There's only a few weeks left to have a handgun transferred to you, and then those are gone also. But going back to your question, probably if I were to say the most important thing, one of the most important things for people that don't know about gun ownership in Canada and how tightly controlled firearms are in Canada is all restricted firearms are registered. That means the government knows who owns them, where they're being stored, where they're being transported to. And anyone that even has a PAL, even a non-restricted PAL, gets basically a criminal record check every 24 hours. It's a program called continuous eligibility screening. So basically you and I had a criminal record check this morning, before we woke up. And basically that's the Canadian firearm program's way to make sure that even though we have a firearms license and we've gone through all that vetting process, and, they talk to our spouse if you have one, when they know job losses, they know medications, they know any kind of criminal history, they know they know all that stuff. But even if we are in the middle of our 5-year license and we get into trouble one night, maybe you're in Montana sitting outside of a bank in an out of town truck.
Don't put that on me right now.
I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying it's going to happen. This is a hypothetical, Joe. But even if all of a sudden you got into trouble, that information would make its way back to the Canadian Firearms Program, and then they would call you within, who knows, even a day, and say, "Well, Joe, what happened with that thing? The day before yesterday, was there any violence involved? We need the file number." And if they think that you were involved in any criminal activity or violence, they would like forward an order to the court to have your guns taken away. So firearms are extremely tightly controlled in Canada. And if you're a law-abiding gun owner, this is what you have to do just to be able to lawfully hold those guns. So very different than I think most people think out there.
Again,
Rod, I just want to. Yeah, I just want to ask a quick question, just because I think some of this information just came out today or maybe yesterday. But what did you see the buyback program? They sent some information on what you get for your guns. Have you seen that? And if you have, I'm sure you have. What's your take on that?
Well, I did a couple interviews already for media on that, and they're like, "Well, what do you think?" And it's like, well, the government came out and they said, "Well, here's the list of these prohibited firearms," and I think it has 11 firearms on there, just the main ones. But when they prohibited those firearms, they prohibited 1,500. Well, actually, we're up to about 2,200 individual models. But what they did was they put like AR-15s, $1,300. And it's be like saying, if you have a car, we're going to give you $1,300 for it. Well, do I have a Bentley, or do I have, a 1978 Honda Civic? Right? Everybody's going to get $1,300. So I think it's really consistent. I don't like to, throw a lot of hyperbolic language around, although, I'm human. So sometimes that happens.
I think you're safe here.
Well, is this my safe space? I think it's just it's absurd, right? It's ridiculous. It just reeks of we don't know what we're doing, but we need to keep that political, news cycle going. Like, oh, we're rolling out the buyback. So here's a price list, and every gun owner that has one of these guns or even knows anything, it's like, what does this even mean? I have a $2,500 AR-15, and I'm going to get $1,300. Or my daughter has a $750 AR-15. She's going to get $1,300 too. It's just silly.
Right.
They're nowhere near prepared to do this gun buyback thing. I don't think you're going to even see it for another year or two.
I have another question the general public would likely be interested in knowing is, where's the funding coming for this buyback? Because there's a lot of these firearms out there, and the implementation of this policy and like going through the whole process, tracking it, having these stations for the buyback, going through all the paperwork, doing all of this, and then handing over the checks. Where is this money coming from? Who's paying for it?
Well, it's going to be printed. It's going to be printed, and it's going to be added to the debt, which our kids are going to be paying for that, paying the interest on that, on these expenditures for decades. And, and we talk about the buyback as if it's a thing. Like right now, they have no idea how they're going to get these guns. Behind closed doors, I get a little bit of information from the government, and basically they've rolled out a couple of different plans internally, and none of them are going to work. So right now they have absolutely no clue how they're going to collect these guns. So
that's so surprising, because all the previous registries and attempts for this have been so successful. So you would have thought it would have been the same here, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we saw with the long gun registry way back in the day, that was when I was first becoming a gun owner. It's when that was rolled out. It was supposed to cost $2 million. It ended up costing $2 billion. And then the government couldn't show that it had a demonstrable positive effect on public safety. So it was ended. So look forward to whatever they say it's going to cost now. It could be 3-4 times as much. Some people say as much as $5 billion. I don't like to throw numbers like that around because I don't know. But I mean, certainly $1 billion or $2 billion is not out of the realm of possibility.
Rod, what's the number one thing we can do? Like, what can we do? What's the number one thing? I know we're gonna get. I know we're probably gonna run out of time fairly soon here. I think maybe a minute or two. But I will ask Austin. He's kind of God here and kind of move on. But what is the number one thing just a regular owner can do?
I will tell you what the number one thing is. You have to get a friendly government, a majority government elected, because in Canada, the way that our system works is the federal government has tremendous power. It's not like the United States, not like a lot of other countries. This British parliamentary system, the federal government can take your house, it can take your property, it can seize guns, it can imprison you, and there's really not a lot you can do. We don't know that because we haven't previously had governments that would do those kinds of things, because they'd be like, well, we'll get tossed out of government, we'll be out of power. This government's different. It's taking advantage of all the power that a federal government has in our system. So these people need to be voted out, and you need to make sure that you participate in the next election and vote in a government that respects you, doesn't want to take your things, that doesn't want to, blame you for things that aren't your fault, and all the rest of that stuff. I'm trying to be careful, but getting a majority or a minority, at least friendly government in, is the number one priority for any gun owner or hunter.
Okay, Joe, I don't know. Do you have another couple of questions here, or where are we at with things, Austin? Or are we going to move along? Let's find out.
Yes, absolutely, Ryan. We do have a short video to show you guys. I will put that on momentarily, but first I would like to say thank you, Rod, for joining us tonight. The conversation's been fun, and it's been interesting to hear the things you've had to say.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So the benefits and importance of having ranges available for people, very, very simply, it gives you a safe, controlled environment to practice your firearm handling and firearm shooting. Having even ground, all of the tools and equipment required to make sure that it's done in a safe, CFO-approved environment. Proper berms, proper backstopping, the ranges are properly measured so that you know if you're sighting in a rifle at 100 yards that you're shooting at 100 yards. It makes a big difference with your accuracy if you're out actually hunting.
I love going to the range. I find it's relaxing. It's a way to get away from everyday life and get out, try new things. Feels good, especially when you get that instant gratification from shooting the target, shooting the trap.
Today was my second time out shooting. I wanted to come out and just to learn something new, get out of the house, meet new people, try a different sport, something I've never done before, and I've learned a lot. It's a great place to come out.
Honestly, people should be considering going to a range because it is about the best community you're going to find. Firearms people are like nobody I've ever met.
There's a great sense of community. The people are lovely. They're always willing to help. The instructors have been phenomenal.
Everybody always wants to help. They want to share what we do. They want to share our passion for our sport. We have hundreds of members here that will be more than happy to put their own shooting aside for the day and work with a new shooter. It's just part of the community. You want to make the new shooters better. You want to make people who don't have the experience better. National Range Day, it's a new initiative with the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. The CCFR asked ranges across the country to participate. Over 100 of us have chosen to participate. And the whole concept behind it is just to share a passion with the public who may not know any better. Unfortunately, the media is doing a wonderful job of keeping the uninformed uninformed. The national pastime in Canada, everybody refers to it as hockey. We have 4 times the number of participants than are registered hockey players in this country. And yet we're treated like we're borderline criminals, or sometimes not always even borderline, because we happen to participate in a sport that uses the same tool that some bad people use. 86% of all violent crimes that are committed with firearms are committed with illegal guns. I'm not the problem. So, I think it's important to get that message out. I think it's important to let everybody know that the firearms community is not your problem. We live in a country that was forged with firearms. They're an important part of how this country came to be, and it's important that we don't lose that history by whitewashing it to fit today's standard. I want my son to be able to understand the history and to be able to touch the same historical pieces that I've had the privilege of touching. And I think it's important that we get that message out. When it comes to the firearms community, they are all fantastic people. I think everybody, whether you're a firearms enthusiast, You hunt once in a while. You want to keep the firearm your grandfather brought back from World War II. Join a range, get involved, even if it's just at a volunteer level. You'll find that you've got some of the best people you're ever going to meet.
Okay, well, I think we're back now. So had a quick chance to check out the video. The video looks great. The On-Way Gun Club is actually pretty close to my house, so I'm going to have to get a chance to go over there. Joe, are you still on? Do we still have you?
I am back. My computer cord unplugged somehow and booted me out, but I jumped back on. Yeah, the On-Way Fishing Game Range, like that looks like a pretty fun place. If that's close to you, I might have to come out to your place and we'll go down for a visit. Looks like a pretty inclusive area.
Yeah, it's cool. I have to get a new scope, a new Scorpion optics scope put on one of my rifles, and we've got to do a commercial for those guys. They're actually new owners over there, which is kind of neat, a Canadian company. And that's the first place I'll bring it because that's going to be an easy, about an 8-minute drive for me. So cool.
There you go. We'll get Brendan Murphy on here and we'll sweet talk and make sure he gives you a pass for a day or two.
Sounds good. I'm pretty sure there's some giant whitetails behind that place too. That's right smack in the middle of the Edmonton bow zone and in an area where there's, some real super giants. I bet you he knows.
Even more reason for some sweet talk. And speaking of sweet talking, Brendan Murphy, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us some time out of your evening.
Thanks for having me.
Ryan and I were just talking. That looks like you guys have a phenomenal organization there. And as a new father, I've got a 7-month-old running around. I think you touched on a very important topic, is the fact that with what we're facing right now, there's a very realistic potential that our children will not be offered the same opportunities we had. And I think that's phenomenal that you're introducing all sorts of people to firearms, not just a typical hunter, but people from all parts of society, all individuals, and introducing them in a responsible, controlled environment. So I think that's a phenomenal thing you're doing over there.
It's something that we're exceptionally proud of. I've got the privilege right now of being the president out at On-Way Fishing Game, and I follow a long line of people who were so committed to building that community lifestyle that I talked about in the previous video. Our range was the first one to have a ladies' league in Alberta. We have a youth program that introduces 10 to 17, 18-year-olds into all aspects of the outdoor lifestyle. So not just the shooting and the archery, but everything from fire starting to camping to you name it, fly fishing, everything that goes with it. So the whole idea with what we're trying to do is not just have a safe, controlled place for ourselves, but to be able to create that safe, controlled environment to teach people how to properly do all of the things that we all love doing.
I think it's extremely important. I mean, I grew up in a small town, Squamish, BC, and my father was a member of the Rod and Gun Club. I have some extremely fond childhood memories of going there as a child, and now I'm a member myself. I hope one day my son will be a member. And not only is it an important place to go and learn about firearms, but you also mentioned I think it's a community pillar if it's done correctly and done in an invitational, like inclusive way. And I also think it teaches children, when they can get involved, the important lessons of the impact these firearms can actually have. And it's a very different situation being at a range, shooting a firearm versus playing a video game, clicking things and respawning in 30 seconds if something goes wrong. You learn the importance, and it's really hammered home how you should respect these firearms. So as a president, I'm sure you are doing phenomenal things for the community over there.
Well, we're doing what we can, but you touched on a critical point there. I mean, I grew up in large cities out east, and I didn't have the luxury of being able to grow up in a community where firearms were part of everyday life. Firearms were always considered a bad thing. Growing up in downtown Toronto or Montreal or Detroit, you don't always appreciate the subtleties of the outdoor lifestyle and the importance of firearms in the community. But since I've moved out to Alberta and I've gotten involved with On-Way, I can tell you it's changed my world rather dramatically.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of On-Way and your involvement over there, And again, speaking of the history of firearms, some of our background, I hear you have some pretty cool pieces you're going to walk us through today. Kind of show a bit. I mean, handguns are a huge topic right now, and this is a bit of a backstory in the development of handguns across time. So what do you got for us?
Okay, so just before I show you the first piece, I just want to give you just a little bit of a snapshot of how handguns came to be. So they actually date all the way back to the 13th century. And in the 13th century, it was basically nothing but a tube with a fuse, really. That was referred to as the term hand cannon. We've heard that periodically, usually for 44 magnums, but it actually comes from that era. From there wasn't a lot of evolution in handguns for quite a while. The first one I've got, this is a reproduction piece. This is a flintlock dragoon. It's a cavalry-style dragoon. This would have been popular and in use in approximately 1760. Now, this one is not. This is a reproduction because you don't want to shoot a black powder piece that old. You never know when it's going to come apart.
Not if you like your fingers, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm fond of them, yeah. So the interesting part with all of the primitive weaponry when it comes to black powder, whether it was the hand cannons, whether it was a matchlock, wheel lock, or flintlock, even percussion caps, which was the next evolution from here, they were all very unreliable. Because of the source of ignition that they were using, this required a piece of flint to hit a piece of steel to make a spark, to light the powder, the whole thing was a very slow process, and a little bit of rain messed it up very, very quickly. So all of the world's militaries, of course, which is where all of the firearm development really came from, were looking for something more reliable, more stopping power, faster reloading. So once they were done with these, in 1848, the modern cartridge was developed. And once they had a self-contained cartridge, it opened the door for a lot of different things. Now, we saw things like...
Those came out in 1848.
That's when the modern cartridge was invented, 1848, yep.
Wow.
Now, they developed a little bit beyond that, but one of the things that happened with all of these early cartridges is that they were firearm specific. So one of the earliest revolvers, which is where it went to next, was one just like this guy. This is a Webley. This came out in 4.55 Webley. It is the only firearm that uses that cartridge. And it was very, very powerful, a lot of stopping power with a 4.55. It's over a 45 ACP. 6-cylinder, very, very quick reload, but it was still 6 shots, you're done. Much more reliable because of the modern cartridges. You pull the trigger, it goes bang, everybody was happy. But it's still only 6 shots. And when you had to reload it, you had to eject all the cartridges and then throw it back, throw in new ones, and now you're not able to shoot while you're doing that. So basically you got 6 shots and you were done. So the quest was still on to solve the problem of how do you get more bullets downrange faster. And they were really searching for the semi-automatic pistol that we know today. So there were several versions of the revolver, whether it was the Webley, whether it was Colt, Smith & Wesson. They were all doing the same type of development, just slightly different directions. But there was a gentleman by the name of Hugo Borchardt who created the first semi-automatic pistol that actually worked, that was truly gas-fed. It was no longer like the volcanic pistol that was a lever action repeating pistol. So it was no longer requiring any mechanical intervention from the user. Problem is, it was heavy. It was almost 3 pounds. It used a 7.65 Borchardt cartridge. So again, very powerful cartridge, very, very fast moving. But the recoil reloaded the next one. It was the first pistol to have a magazine in the handle, and it would fire them off. But it was only a 7-shot. And it was not very fond of things like mud and dirt and things like that, which in most military applications, guess what you're dealing with?
Yeah, a little bit of mud and dirt.
Yep. So they only made 3,000 of them. You can still get them. They run anywhere from $30,000 to $130,000 on average right now. But